Why intelligent people scare society more than you think. Schopenhauer, have you ever wondered why truly intelligent people, those who think deeply, question everything, and refuse to conform, often find themselves isolated, misunderstood, or even feared by society? Why is it that intelligence, rather than being universally celebrated, often leads to alienation? The answer is not just about jealousy or resentment. It is something much deeper, something that has been embedded in the very structure of human society for centuries. Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers in history, understood this better than most. He saw intelligence not as a gift that guarantees happiness, but as a burden that separates the individual from the crowd. And the more you think about it, the more terrifyingly true it becomes. Society, at its core, is built on a delicate balance of order, norms, and collective beliefs. It thrives on predictability, on shared illusions that keep the majority of people moving in the same direction. From childhood, we are conditioned to follow rules, accept traditions, and trust the systems that govern our lives. The vast majority of people do not question these things, not because they are incapable, but because questioning them is uncomfortable. It disrupts stability. It forces confrontation with uncertainty, and uncertainty is terrifying. But intelligent individuals, those who see beyond the surface, cannot help but ask questions. They see contradictions where others see normality. They notice manipulation where others see guidance. They recognize the absurdity of customs that others follow blindly. And this makes them dangerous, not in a violent or rebellious way, but in a way that destabilizes the very fabric of collective belief.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Think about history. The greatest thinkers, the most revolutionary minds, were almost always met with resistance. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the minds of the youth, not because he actually harmed anyone, but because he asked too many questions. Galileo was condemned by the Church for challenging the belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. Nietzsche was ridiculed for declaring that the foundations of morality were built on illusions. These were not criminals. They were not threats in the conventional sense. They were simply individuals who saw reality too clearly, who refused to accept comforting lies, and for that, they were cast out. But here's the real question: why does society react this way? Why do people fear those who think differently? The answer lies in something uncomfortable. Most people do not want the truth. They want certainty. They want to believe that their way of life is justified, that their beliefs are correct, that their actions have meaning. The intelligent disrupt this by introducing doubt. They force people to confront the possibility that everything they were taught might be wrong. And for most, this is unbearable. It is not just about intelligence itself, but about what intelligence does. It dissolves illusions, and illusions are what hold society together. But here's where things get even darker. The fear of intelligence is not just about ideas, it is also about power. Intelligence grants a kind of autonomy that threatens authority, and those who think critically are harder to control. They do not blindly follow orders. They do not accept propaganda without question. They do not base their self-worth on societal validation. And this makes them unpredictable. But governments, corporations, religious institutions, they all rely on a population that can be influenced, persuaded, and kept in line. The intelligent resist this. They carve their own paths, and that is why they are not just feared, but often suppressed. So ask yourself, Have you ever felt like you see things others don't? Have you ever noticed patterns that others ignore? Have you ever questioned something that everyone else accepts without hesitation? If so, you may already understand, on some level, why intelligence is not always a blessing. It isolates. It makes connection harder. It forces you to live in a world where you see the game being played but cannot always participate in it. The curse of awareness, why intelligence leads to loneliness. The more you understand, the lonelier you become. This is the paradox of intelligence. Awareness expands your perception of reality, but in doing so, it separates you from those who do not see the same things. It is not arrogance. It is not superiority. It is simply the consequence of seeing beyond what others take for granted. The world is full of people who are content with simple answers, who find comfort in routine, who see life as a series of predetermined steps. Go to school, get a job, start a family, follow the rules, and accept what you are told. But an intelligent mind does not rest so easily. It questions, it dissects, it searches for truth, even when the truth is unsettling. And this creates a fundamental problem. How do you connect with people when the very foundation of their worldview is something you cannot accept? This is why intelligence so often leads to isolation. Not because the intelligent choose to be alone, but because they struggle to find others who truly understand them. Conversations feel shallow. Social interactions feel scripted. The topics that interest most people, gossip, trivial drama, blind adherence to tradition, feel empty. And so, the intelligent withdraw, not out of misanthropy, but out of exhaustion. It is tiring to constantly translate your thoughts into something palatable for others. It is exhausting to hold back your questions for the sake of social harmony. And so, many simply stop trying. They retreat into books, into solitude, into their own minds, where thoughts can flow freely without the burden of explanation. But this loneliness is not just social, it is existential. Because intelligence does not only separate people from others, it also separates them from illusions. The more you understand the world, the less comforting it becomes. You see the chaos beneath the order. You recognize how much of life is dictated by randomness, how little control you truly have, how fragile human existence is. You realize that most of what society values, money, status, reputation, is ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And this realization, while freeing, is also isolating. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You cannot return to the bliss of ignorance. You cannot pretend that the illusions are real just to fit in. Schopenhauer understood this deeply. He saw intelligence as a double-edged sword, granting clarity, but at the cost of happiness. He believed that the more a person understands life, the less they can enjoy it in the way that others do. Because how can you fully immerse yourself in trivial pleasures when you are painfully aware of their fleeting nature? How can you engage in small talk when your mind is occupied with questions of existence, meaning, and the nature of reality? The world does not cater to deep thinkers. It caters to those who accept its surface without question. And so, the intelligent often feel like strangers in their own society, watching from the outside, unable to fully belong. But here's the real tragedy: this loneliness is not just imposed from the outside. It is also self-inflicted, because the intelligent, in recognizing the flaws of the world, often build walls to protect themselves. They become cynical. They assume that no one will understand them, so they stop seeking connection. They convince themselves that solitude is the only option, that relationships are futile, that society is beyond saving. And in doing so, they trap themselves in their own intelligence, mistaking insight for isolation, wisdom for disconnection. But is this the only path? Must intelligence always lead to loneliness? Or is there another way, a way to bridge the gap between deep thinking and meaningful connection? The tragic fear of the herd, why society rejects those who think differently. Society is built on patterns, on predictability, but on the silent agreement that most people will follow the same unspoken rules. It functions not because people think for themselves, but because they conform. The majority move in unison, guided by tradition, authority, and the fear of standing out. This is not necessarily a conscious decision, it is an instinct, an evolutionary mechanism designed for survival. And throughout history, those who fit in were protected by the group, while those who stood apart faced exile, loneliness, or even death. And so, over thousands of years, humanity has developed an unspoken law. Those who think differently, who challenge the status quo, who break the rhythm of the herd, are dangerous, not because they intend harm, but because they disrupt the shared illusion that keeps society stable. This is why intelligent people, true independent thinkers, are often met with resistance. It is not because they are wrong, but because they introduce uncertainty. They ask questions no one wants to answer. They refuse to accept things just because that's the way they've always been. And this makes them a threat not physically, but ideologically. Because once a person starts questioning the foundations of their reality, everything becomes unstable. If one person breaks from the herd and sees the world differently, others might follow. And if too many people start thinking for themselves, the structure that holds society together begins to shake. Governments, religions, corporations, every institution that thrives on obedience understand this at a fundamental level. They do not need to silence intelligent thinkers outright. They simply need to make them feel unwelcome, isolate them, label them as strange, difficult, arrogant. Convince the masses that deep thinking is impractical, that questioning authority is dangerous, that blending in is the safest path. And for the most part, this strategy works. Most people, even those with intelligence, learn to suppress their thoughts, to keep their questions to themselves, to play along with the game for the sake of acceptance. But what happens to those who refuse? What happens to the ones who cannot turn off their minds, who cannot pretend to believe in illusions they have already seen through? They are pushed to the edges. They become outsiders, observers rather than participants. And society, rather than engaging with them, fears them. Because people fear what they do not understand. They fear those who do not speak in clichés, who do not blindly follow trends, who do not seek validation through conformity. This is why artists, philosophers, and visionaries are so often misunderstood in their time. They see too much. They think too differently. They live outside the boundaries that others find comfortable. And so, society rejects them, not always deliberately, but instinctively, as if pushing away an anomaly that does not fit into the grand design. But here is where the tragedy deepens. The intelligent, in recognizing this rejection, often retreat further. They stop trying to connect. They embrace solitude, not always because they want to, but because they feel there is no other choice. And this creates a cycle. Society fears the intelligent because they are different, and the intelligent, feeling this rejection, withdraw even more, thus making them seem even more distant, even more other. But is this an unbreakable cycle? Is isolation the inevitable fate of those who think differently? Or is there a way to exist in both worlds, to see beyond the illusions, yet still find connection, meaning, and belonging? The path to true freedom, how to think independently without losing yourself if intelligence leads to isolation. If questioning the world separates us from those who accept it without thought, then what is the solution? Must the thinker always be an outsider, doomed to observe but never truly belong? Or is there a way to exist in both worlds, to embrace independent thought while still finding meaning, connection, and fulfillment? This is the ultimate challenge for those who see beyond the surface, how to live in a society that fears intelligence without being consumed by loneliness or resentment. The answer is not to reject the world entirely, nor is it to conform mindlessly. The answer lies in mastering the delicate balance between understanding reality as it is and choosing how to engage with it. The first step is accepting that most people will never think as deeply as you do, and that this is not their fault. Intelligence is not just about IQ or knowledge, it is about perception, about seeing the hidden mechanics behind human behavior, about recognizing the illusions that others accept as truth. But just because you see more does not mean others are wrong for seeing less. Most people are not interested in dismantling the structures of society, not because they are incapable, but because they find comfort in certainty. And that is their choice. The mistake many intelligent people make is assuming that everyone must think the same way, that awakening others is a duty, or that intelligence must always be in opposition to the world. But wisdom is not just about knowing the truth, it is about knowing when to share it, when to hold back, and when to simply observe. This is where true freedom begins, in releasing the expectation that others must understand you. The need to be fully understood is a trap, a subtle form of seeking validation from a world that will never fully grasp the depth of your thoughts. Instead of demanding that society accept you, accept that you are different and find peace in that difference. This does not mean isolation, it means choosing your battles, choosing where to invest your energy, choosing when to engage and when to walk away. Not every conversation needs to be profound. Not every interaction needs to be intellectually stimulating. But sometimes connection is found in the simplest moments, not in discussing philosophy, but in sharing laughter, in experiencing life, in being present. But how do you maintain your independence of thought while still engaging with a world that often resists it? The key is adaptability. Intelligence should not be rigid. It should be fluid, capable of navigating different spaces without losing its essence. Learn to communicate your ideas in a way that others can digest. Speak in metaphors, in stories, in language that resonates with emotion rather than just logic. The most influential thinkers were not those who alienated themselves, but those who found ways to bridge the gap between their insights and the understanding of the masses. Instead of seeing society as an enemy, see it as a landscape to navigate. Some people will never understand you fully, and that is okay. Others will surprise you with their depth, their curiosity, their willingness to question. But find those people. Build your own circle, even if it is small. Quality will always matter more than quantity. And finally, let go of the idea that intelligence must always bring suffering. Schopenhauer believed that the more one understands life, the less one can enjoy it. But must this always be true? Awareness does not have to be a burden. It can be a gift. Yes, you see the flaws of the world, but you also see its beauty in ways others may not. You recognize patterns, connections, the intricate details of existence that most overlook. Intelligence does not have to isolate you, it can enrich your experience of life if you allow it. Find joy in the depth of your mind, but do not let it consume you. Think deeply, but live fully. Observe reality, but do not forget to participate in it. Because in the end, the goal is not just to understand life, it is to live it.